And I can truly say good morning from Tyson's, good afternoon in Tel Aviv, and good evening in Bangalore. Welcome everybody to our program. My name is Juhi Nathani. I'm Assistant Director of International Business Investment at the Fairfax County Economic Development Authority, or FCEDA. I'm so excited to welcome you to today's program on cybersecurity innovation, India, Israel, USA, as our second episode of Talking Tech with Fairfax EDA. FCEDA India is thrilled to collaborate once again with FCEDA Israel for this program. Our two offices are pulling this program together collectively. Back in 2017, we actually had a joint reception to celebrate 25 years of business and trade relations between the two nations. We see India and Israel as natural allies, and together with the United States, the three countries are also natural collaborators in a partnership between technology-rich nations and economies. Today, we will talk about trends, challenges, and opportunities in cybersecurity, with a special focus on Fairfax County, a prime East Coast business location in the state of Virginia, which, for those of you who don't know, ranked #1 for business and business climate, and that was by two separate organizations and publications. And in case you're not aware, FCEDA is an independent agency of the local government of Fairfax County in Northern Virginia, with a mission to attract and retain business investment into the county. We're also part of the InNOVAtion, an alliance of 10 jurisdictions in Northern Virginia that work together to promote the region.
Data sharing is a really key part of the ForeScout solution because we have over 3,000 customers that feed into a device cloud where we can gather intel on all of those devices. So millions and millions of devices, we can classify them, understand what their expected behavior is, right? Who they should be talking to on the network, and any risks or vulnerabilities that are associated to them. So helping our customers identify those risks. This is really important when something like Log4j is announced, right? Everyone wants an immediate snapshot on what is my risk, what is my vulnerability. So being able to have that data at your fingertips and answer that question is really critical for our customers. And in an effort to better understand those risks kind of across the industry, we have introduced a research arm of ForeScout called Vidiri Labs. And they focus on using that data to really drive some trends and some insights around vulnerabilities and threats. So if you're not familiar with them, I would recommend ForeScout's website has all their reports that they've generated thus far. Some really interesting insights around ransomware and nation state attacks, where we can look to see what verticals are being attacked the most, right? And what are your riskiest devices that are on your network? So, a way to look at, hey, do I have these potential devices on my network, and how do I protect myself against them? So, Vidiri Labs has been a great investment for ForeScout because it's our way of giving back to the security community and really sharing the intel that we've gathered across these 3,000 customers and all the data that we've been able to gather, giving back to the community to make us all safer and more educated on what those threats are. So beyond the security value, Vidiri Labs has also been a great entry point into some key stakeholders throughout our government customers and our commercial customers. So it's really driving a lot of conversations with a wide variety of our customer base. This has also opened up some additional media and marketing benefits for ForeScout because it's given us sort of a wider exposure. We've been, those reports from Vidiri Labs have been featured in large publications like Wired and Politico, but then also local media outlets, which for us, we do a lot of work with the US federal government, and having that conversation and access to those key stakeholders with this data has been really, really beneficial for us. So the kind of pivoting into us being located in Fairfax County, a big portion of our business is working with the federal government. We provide cyber capabilities to both the Department of Defense as well as civilian agencies. And so having that proximity has been really, really important to us and driving those those relationships with those customers. So I'd like to take a minute to kind of highlight, I mean, Fairfax County for us has been really valuable. As I mentioned, proximity, the geographic logistics, so from the location itself. Alex, you brought up some really good points, right? We have customers all over the world. So being able to get to them easily with multiple airports has been key. Having that access to the federal government close by. And I'll say working with the federal government is very beneficial, but it's also very arduous, right? You need some expertise to really understand the ins and out and how to navigate that conversation. And so having that talent pool so close to us and being able to pull into people who work with the government every day and help navigate those conversations, helping us work with the budget conversations. These large programs can be years of prep work, but then there's years of benefits as well. And there's a lot of people that that can help navigate that really difficult process. So that proximity to those resources have been really important. And then those key stakeholders, as I mentioned. The other part with ForeScout is that I mentioned the data sharing and that we gather all of this really vital information for organizations. And it's beneficial to ForeScout from a cybersecurity perspective, but there's a lot of other technical partnerships and tools that benefit from the ForeScout data. So for us to be able to share that data within an ecosystem, to make tools that might be time-based, we can make them now real time by saying as soon as a device connects to your network, we can feed that intel into other products. And then now all of a sudden those products become smarter and more real time. Excuse me. So being located in Fairfax County gives us access to all of those other technology organizations that are also located there. So we've really built a really strong ecosystem and partnership there. And then finally, the talent pool, right? We, as I mentioned earlier, we're in the midst of expanding. So in my role, I have all technical resources that communicate with customers. So I have sales, I have support and services, right? Delivery arm. And now that we're expanding into Pune, we have a lot of cultural navigation that we have to do as well, right? So building out those teams is really important to me. I want to make sure I have a collaborative team that's working together. My talent pool in Virginia has been fantastic because they've helped us expand into those other areas. And then, as I mentioned, we have a strong support team in Tel Aviv. So bringing in diverse, strong technical candidates in that Virginia area has been key to my strategy and to best supporting our commercial customers as well as our government customers. So it's been a big part of my strategy. And I think the dynamics between those three locations has been very successful. So that's a little bit about my experience, obviously, those locations. I'll stick on at the end, I think, to answer any questions that anyone might have. But Asher, I'll turn it back over to you.
Ellen, thank you very much. It was a really nice overview on the point you made. We'll move to the next part of the program. We're going to have a very interesting panel discussion that will bring different point of view with a different focus. So we have three very nice gentlemen and a lady that agreed to be part of the program. The first one is Vinod from Atos, which is the global CTO, MDR Group. Kiana from Secure Tech 360, the CEO, and Seth from Merlin Ventures, managing partner. So I would like, Vinod, if you can start, talk a little bit about yourself and what you guys seeing with your operation. You are a global company. And then Seth and Kiana will introduce themselves as well.
Sure, thanks, Asher. Vinod here. I am the global CTO for Managed Detection and Response at Atos. And I also play the role of Deputy Global CTO for all the cybersecurity services. So it's interesting times in terms of all the different escalations happening, war, the political escalations. So we do see a number of patterns of attacks and things that are happening. So I guess we'll discuss some of those things later in the conversation. So yeah.
Kiana, please.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Kiana Gainey. I been running SecureTech 360 for about 11 years, primarily in the federal and state and local government space. I do have some commercial clients, and just like he stated, just the recent events have been very interesting in this new landscape. Most of my clients are first responders, so making sure that the data is readily available, making sure that the data has not been interrupted or manipulated has been also very, very key. And then also just making sure that the development cycle has security built into it. So just very interesting times. I'm very excited to be a part of this panel to further the discussions.
Seth?
Sure. Seth, I'm the managing partner of Merlin Ventures, which is the strategic investment arm of a larger company also based in Fairfax called Merlin Cyber that works with a lot of the top cyber companies in the world to help them tackle the US federal market. So Forescout was actually one of our early successes there, really helping with some of the larger transactions there. And as we worked with some of those really large companies and built up the resources around that, we realized there was an opportunity to go and find earlier stage companies as well, invest in them, and help shepherd them along to eventually enter that federal market. So we now have an office in Tel Aviv, in addition to our office in Fairfax County, where we are working with a lot of sort of the cutting edge startups as well as the later stage cyber companies that are trying to get into the US federal market or government market in general.
Okay, very good. So let's go to we have several questions that we are prepared in advance. So the first one, given the war in Ukraine, that has become, of course, very vicious on the kinetic side, but it's also become a cyber event or cyber ongoing event situation. And I think the number one concern we have here in the US and in many, many other countries, what the implication of this war on critical infrastructure that also impact people's daily life. And I'd like to get your perspective. Vinod, if you can start, because you guys have a knock all over, what do you guys see that you guys maybe put extra emphasis, maybe extra cyber tool that you need to tight? What do you guys see on infrastructure that are critical to our life?
Yeah, thanks, Asher. So I guess this is what's happening today is like a template or a peek into the future. As going forward, as physical wars happen, there will be silent cyber wars that are happening in parallel. So I think, like you rightly mentioned, one of the key concerns would be that, and the aftermath of this is in parallel, there will be attacks that are happening on the critical infrastructure. Even in normal times, we have seen things like the Colonial pipeline attack, which kind of took down the pipeline for quite some time. So there is a lot of today not visible but silent attacks happening on both sides on the critical infrastructure piece, utilities, manufacturing, oil pipelines. So that's one part of the story. The other side of it is, when we say critical infrastructure, it also talks about communication infrastructure. So we have already seen that there are some satellite communication providers who have been attacked and taken down in Ukraine. So we can expect similar such focus on attacks on satellites, attacks on the internet pipes. So that's the other side that's happening. One other thing would also be escalated attacks on the hyperscalers, because there is a lot of infrastructure out on Azure, AWS, GCP, etc. So we can definitely see more attacks happening there, because bringing down a hyperscaler can create a huge impact on the economy as well, because there is a lot of that weighted. In the interest of not spending too much time myself, just one other interesting thing that we will see as an offshoot is development of very sophisticated cyber weapons. Back in the days of Stuxnet. Stuxnet is considered one of the most sophisticated malware that came out, and that happened during the tension that was existing between the US and Iran at that stage. But any offshoot of escalation like this is that the nation states would spend a lot of money in developing very sophisticated cyber weapons, and we can expect those kind of weapons to also evolve during this phase. So the implication is That then goes to the cyber crime syndicates, which then makes it easier to attack the commercial side as well. So there is a big implication in terms of the next wave of sophisticated threats coming in based on what's happening now.
Very interesting. Seth, related question. So from your investment perspective or what Merlin's saying, you see any more highlight or necessity for new technology that deal with, of course, protection on infrastructure security?
I mean, I think it's been a huge focus, both in the government space and, the government really pushing the commercial sector as well in the last year, 12 months, especially. I mean, I think we've been talking about it for a long time, but now we're actually seeing a lot of people like actually putting weight behind it from a, government perspective. You're seeing, companies like Clarity, right, and others taking a lot of investment and grow very quickly, right? So there's certainly a lot more focus in this space. I know Forescout has made some investments in this space with acquisitions and is doubling down on that as well. So yeah, I mean, there's absolutely more focus on that than I would say there has been historically. And yeah, I mean, it's an area we're looking at. For us, the challenge is always finding those companies that are doing something that is not necessarily just derivative of what some of the bigger companies have already achieved, somebody like a Clarity or Forescout, and really finding those novel ways of looking at things in ways that are not currently being protected. And so there's some companies that are doing interesting things around firmware analysis, firmware protection, things like that we've looked at. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely more focus on critical infrastructure than there has been historically.
Okay, Kiana, a follow-up question on that. The NSA, the NSC in the US put a lot of warning before and during the war now. How is that translated, the work that you are doing in terms of, I don't know, more consultation with your federal customers, more they calling you, you putting more resources on specific that the NSA warned about? Please give us your perspective.
Yes, certainly. With the current climate, just like Seth has mentioned, it's been in talks for some time now, but now you're seeing more action being taken, especially by decision makers, because it's happening in real time. So you're seeing a lot of different technologies being able to actually be deployed into these environments to kind of help with the current landscape. A lot more resources for cybersecurity experts in the space, more than ever. Before, it was like onesie twosies that they would put on certain projects, but now you're seeing more influx of them wanting more security from the beginning of projects, not just somewhere in the middle or at the end. And I think even to the credit of the Biden and Harris administration, they really have pushed the emphasis on, deploying and having a more effective critical infrastructure and more protections in place. I think a lot of people, it started happening in real time when you start seeing elementary kids talking about things happening with their parents' gas. So you're starting to see it in mainstream. So cybersecurity is no longer just this scary thing that's happening in the background. It's happening in real time. So I think that it's really taking center stage, which I think it should have always been, just because I've been in the space for 20 years, but you're starting to see more of a need and you're starting to see more of a demand, which is great. Especially for companies like myself, or even companies that are looking to develop more critical applications or to be able to get into that space. So you're going to start seeing, in my opinion, a lot more innovation and a lot more support for cybersecurity moving forward.
I mean, just to add to that, I think we, in some ways, may have actually gotten lucky with the timing of things like the Colonial Pipeline and the meat processing plant, where they were wake-up calls that did not happen during a war, right? It was a ransomware gang, right? And now we're saying, oh shoot, we need to really secure this critical infrastructure before that war happens and we're in really bad shape. Right? I was talking to somebody yesterday about, why has Ukraine's electrical grid sort of held up? And some of it is, maybe the Russians don't necessarily want to destroy it. And if you're going to go do a Stuxnet type attack against an electrical grid, you run the risk of destroying it and having a heavy rebuild cost. But also, Ukraine has had 10 years of knowing that this was happening and working on securing that. And so I think we've had some wake-up calls lately that are now making that focus on critical infrastructure a lot more important. And hopefully it puts us on much better footing going forward.
Yeah, I read another angle is companies that provide cybersecurity solution let's say, federal government, they are being attacked themselves, like Okta. So that's interesting that I think the NSA put a notice that everyone, not just the customer, companies that provide solutions to be much more aware of the.
But look who attacked Okta. It wasn't, you know, a nation state. It was some teenagers in South America, right? Like, that's the sort of stuff we're getting attacked by now, and that's the sort of stuff we need to harden. You know, we need to be able to definitely fight that off in order to fight off the next level of what comes after it.
Yeah,
So
I think
go ahead, Vinod, please add.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point you brought in, Asher, that it's not just the security of the organization itself that is in question now, but also the supply chain and the tech partners who are serving that organization. So all of these are, attack vectors and targets for the cybercrime syndicates and for nation states. So the way to get into an organization could be through, the supply chain part of it, could be through tech providers. So if you're talking about a critical organization, the whole ecosystem around it is actually under threat. So they also need to be equally protected to keep the organization secure.
Yes, very interesting. Let's go a little bit deeper on the technology, just because the fun of the discussion. So we look like areas that are getting more attention the last few years, now even more, the Internet of Things protection, set a lot of companies raising money in the application security, which has become like a layer that connect with many other applications, and that's where the weak links happening. Also, of course, risk management and incident response, which is a key to deal with attack. And of course, what we all deal with is what we call securing the workforce, either remote or now coming back to the office, on the way stopping at Starbucks, logging in. So what do you guys see in terms of the specific technology that getting more or need to get more attention from the list I mentioned, for example?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective on the investment side, the application security space is absolutely getting a ton of focus right now. We've actually had a couple investments where, like, literally as we were trying to close the paperwork, they got acquired by bigger companies. And I think, to Vinod's point, that's key to securing like everything, right? Like basically securing the supply chain leads to critical infrastructure, but also pretty much every other element of our IT infrastructure, right? So for us, I mean, there's some companies we're looking at that are pure just, app security, right? Like pure code scanning, but most of the stuff really has that broader story of how do I secure my systems from the perspective of making sure nothing gets into them that is eventually going to bite me, like a SolarWinds, type of attack down the road. So that's certainly been a big area. And then Asher, when you and I were discussing this event beforehand and you shared sort of some of the topics, I think I commended you on calling it securing the workforce as opposed to using zero trust as the term. But I mean, that whole area, right? How do I allow people to work remotely and give them just the limited access they need to, whatever internal systems I have, really that has obviously gotten very, very important in the last 2.5 years. So, I mean, those are certainly some of the areas that we're seeing a lot of focus on.
Kiana, that's the last point. Federal government moved to work remote a lot. Also, my organization, Phelps County EDA, around March, April 2020, we all started to move to work remotely, but we have to change our system. We moved to Microsoft 360. So what do you see? What have you seen? Securing the federal remote workforce that now start to come back, but also, have you got more attention on the whole risk management, incident response dashboard, or something that you provide?
Yes. So over the last few years, the incident response has been kind of like, I do a lot of healthcare organizations as well. So incident response was like key. They really were trying to ramp up to see where they had issues as far as what would happen in worst case scenarios. And then also a lot of folks were used to working remote, but just not as many days. So before, they always had like AWS days where they were off probably, one Friday out of a 2-week span. And that went from that to almost, 5 days a week. So that was definitely a change. They went right into either trying to figure out if they're going to use Zoom, or were they going to use a Microsoft product, or were they going to use a Google product? And then you almost kind of had a hodgepodge of different organizations kind of trying to figure out what was the best to do. So it was a lot of ramping up quickly, but I would say to my customers' credit, and even some of our commercial clients, they were very responsive as far as trying to find the most secure manner to make sure that they kept their customers protected and that they also kept their, kept the work going. So it has been trial by error, but definitely we learned a lot. And I think, like he said, to his credit, even before the war with Ukraine, there were so many other little things that were going on in between that kind of helped us really be able to ramp up and also be able to kind of keep a steady pace.
Vinod, you want to add anything? Ellen, you want to add anything to the conversation from that perspective? You guys do a lot of asset and visibility.
Yeah.
You have customers that kind of.
Yeah. As I mentioned, one of the things that we're doing is collecting all of this data across all the customers. And we have a live dashboard that has real-time data on where we're seeing the attacks, what type of attacks, the verticals they're going after. So I think I can post the link to the chat, or my colleague will post it, but this actually gives some real-time data on what we're seeing from all the different types of attacks that are happening. So it's been very interesting to see the trends happening over the last month. But I would recommend a peek at the dashboard.
Okay, so let's Vinod, you want to add it?
Yeah, adding on to that, I think we see a lot of interest in anything related to detection and response, essentially because of so many attacks happening. Today, it's a given that detection is not going to always take place, that there will be ways that the detection will get bypassed. But so that's why, adding to Kiana's point as well, the response side has become super critical today, because you might miss on an attack, but then once you know something is happening, how can you quickly respond to it and contain it before it becomes a major breach or a major downtime event? So I think there's a lot of interest in technologies that do this. And, in fact, as Atos, we work with very large organizations in terms of doing this detection and response, as an offering. But fundamentally, so many variants around it. How do you detect and respond to an OT or a critical infrastructure attack? How do you do the same thing in cloud? How do you do it in data center? How do you combine all of these? So it's, I think the detection and response space is also exploding with, all of these new developments that are happening.
So I have a follow-up question on that. Maybe Seth, you can start. Artificial intelligence in the cyber, especially on infrastructure security, are we seeing more offering from companies? We see more deployment, because that's really, you have a massive network that attack maybe multiple locations. What do you see the role of AI now?
Yeah, I think if you go back a few years, right, you had companies obviously pitching AI products. Now I think it's just sort of assumed that almost every product out there has some level of machine learning or AI, whatever you want to call it. So yes, it's sort of just become part of how you build a system, right? You want systems now that can filter out a lot of the noise and not make somebody sort through 10,000 alerts to figure out which ones actually matter. So I think it's become essentially just table stakes if you want to have a modern cybersecurity company in a lot of fields. Yes, there's still some that you don't necessarily need to do it, but the vast majority, you're seeing companies just focus very heavily on finding the right AI talent and building in the right use cases into their solution to make it a lot easier for users, right? And handle the fact that we don't necessarily have, just a whole room full of SOC analysts sitting there waiting to deal with everything.
Yeah, I remember the days 15 years ago when I was with an Israeli company called Aladdin Knowledge System. We have a eSafe solution. We have a team that would develop signature for a text. Remember those days? Those days are over. But let's move to the next topic, which actually combine. Let's talk about what's unique of the ecosystem and the cyber ecosystem in AI and cloud in Northern Virginia, from your perspective. And Ellen, you're welcome, of course, to be part of the conversation. But as a supporting question, which is very important for our prospect, what is a good strategy for a product company, product and solution to come to the US market in terms of how they should ramp up their activity, channel, direct, resale agreement, giving that the uniqueness about Northern Virginia ecosystem, because we have, as Alex, we have $1 billion that are being spent here on different areas, not just by the federal government, by financial system, transportation, insurance. They're looking for innovation solution, but what is the right way given our unique area? Kiana, once you start, as a small company, maybe looking for new innovation solutions.
So what's been key for us is partnerships. We have used and outsourced teams out of India to kind of help with some of our support to our clients. So I would say definitely finding a US-based company that probably already has a few clients in the space and starting to work on partnerships will probably be the best go-to-market strategy. I'm really paying attention to some of the current trends, looking at what's happening with the current administration and where they're putting dollars and money as far as innovation. Like you said earlier, there's a lot of innovation in the research and development space for artificial intelligence. I'm starting to see a lot of ramp up for that. And anything that's dealing with application security is also very big right now. So finding either companies that either have some type of synergy for you. Like for us, we were big on the cybersecurity side, but we also brought in development teams to bring out applications for to develop some applications for some of our healthcare clients. So finding somewhere where you can kind of almost have a perfect marriage would be the best method, I would think, right now in this current climate.
Okay, Vinod, what are you looking when you want to some new innovation solution? How you guys work with technology partners?
Yeah, so we do have a lot of good technology partners. We leverage, and we also have some innovative methods like what we call as a scale-up program, where we look at upcoming innovative companies. We kind of onboard them through a selection process, and then they get to work with our customer base, which is fairly large. It's spread around 70 countries. So in terms of skill sets that you're referring to in the Fairfax area, I think it's just some comment on that. So the Northern Virginia side has a lot of good security operation centers traditionally. So if you look at last 10-15 years, there have been a lot of SOCs, as we call it, that's here serving the federal or serving global customer base. So the skill set on experts on the security operations side is a great base for Northern Virginia. And also because there is the federal side and a lot of investment into R&D side from government also, I think we also get access into good cybersecurity R&D professionals, whether it is the AI space or whether it is some niche area that we want to build out to address the newer threats coming in. So from that perspective, I think there is a good set of skill sets that are available. So which makes it easy to build it in-house, or also look at innovative companies, startups that are there where we can partner with and then take them on to our customers. So both sides work very well.
Okay, Seth, you guys have a unique model, investment.
Yeah.
Bring them here, channel sales, even you used to give them even space here in our office building next door. So can you talk about that model?
Yeah, so like you said, right, our business, my focus is on the investment side, but our parent company's business model is helping companies tackle the government market, right? Whether that's federal or now also expanding to state and local. And so I think to the comments already made, right? I mean, looking for somebody that actually understands that market and can sort of act as your guide in that space is going to be very important. I think what we've seen is, it doesn't necessarily work to just find that channel partner and hand it all off to them and say, go sell for me, right? There has to be that partnership. And the companies that want to sell into those markets also need to make some investment in that, right? And that typically means at least having one person that is really dedicated to those government markets that you want to sell into, that cares just about your product and is going to be that go-between for your company and that channel partner that you're working with to sell into that market. And that's where we've seen the biggest success is when, companies, take another Israeli company, CyberArk, right, where we do a huge chunk of their business for them through the federal market, right? And they have a small team of reps that work very closely with our team of reps, right? And we can help each other. They can focus very much on knowing their product, knowing where to focus in terms of, we think there's an opportunity over here. And then our team can help be that guide to navigate those different agencies and help sell into them and actually negotiate the agreements. So I think that's the model that we've seen work best, is where there's a bit of investment on both sides. And you can really build up that expertise to go into those markets.
A question that came from the chat box. What are the next frontier vulnerabilities that you think you will see in 22 that the smart negative hacker people maybe might be thinking about? What's your take? Ellen, you want to start, please?
Yeah, so I have my mind set on that last question because I wanted to add just one other thing in there.
Sure, please.
And then
Let's go back.
One of the things that's really important, and I'll tie it back to being in Fairfax County, is the work that we've done with NIST. And that is something I would recommend because we've been very successful in some of the big projects around zero trust, around critical infrastructure, and being that proximity of being so close to their center of excellence, we've been able to really get involved in some of those bigger projects and drive the recommendations coming out of NIST, which then has a very large impact. And so that's been really valuable to us. So I wanted to add that in on that last part. But I'm sorry, so the question around evolving threats.
Yes.
Yeah, I think what we've seen a big uptick in is ransomware, right? Because now that you see a lot of hackers are starting to understand how to monetize their skill set, right? So they're coming in, and the ransomware, we saw a huge jump over the last 2 years, but we continue to see this in organizations where, even ransomware that is several years old is still using exploits, right? Vulnerabilities that have patches out there, but just simple cyber hygiene has missed some of that protection that organizations get from that ransomware. But it's probably been one of the biggest influxes that we've seen. And the basic protection against it is to do that stuff that's kind of boring, which is the patching. It's the keeping, it's staying on top of those things that really can protect yourself from that low-hanging fruit for hackers, which is the old dated ransomware that still continues to pop up.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Anyone from the other people that participate on the Zoom meeting is welcome to ask question or answer that question that way. What are the next frontier threat to our system?
So yeah, I can just add some things to that. So I think the other critical vector where a lot of attacks are happening when we look at what we see in our SOCs is on the cloud infrastructure, because there is a lot of migration into the cloud that's happened. So most companies today are hybrid, multi-cloud. So either you have data centers and there is a cloud presence. So the attacker focus is in terms of, and because cloud is very dynamic, we see a lot of attacks towards taking over, for example, the cloud console of companies, because once you take over the cloud console, you pretty much can do whatever you want in terms of, taking out data, controlling the complete infrastructure. In fact, ransomware is a big issue. There is also a different type of ransom that happens where companies' cloud console gets taken over and then you have to pay a ransom to get it back. So which means that typically your whole business operation can stop. And the OT and IIoT attacks are also on the increase because that leads to the critical infrastructure compromise that can happen. So these are some additional trends I just wanted to add as immediate in 2022, where we will see a big influx.
Thank you, Vinod. Anyone from the other guests that are attending from India that want to add to the conversation or answer the question about threat, welcome to join. If not, I have another very question on my mind. There's so much in the US and other countries, because of the physical expansion of the corona in the last 2 years, there's so much money in the system. that citizen and companies are getting, government is giving. And that led or has led to a lot of financial fraud and more vulnerability on the financial system that we have. I think I'd love to hear discussion about that, especially I'll give you an example. In the housing market, there was some incident where people were fraud when it's come to wiring transfer to do the settlement date for buying homes. And that's a title company being sued, and that's banks are very careful. Anyone wants to talk about the extra cautious and extra attack on our financial system because there's so much money in the system now? Okay.
Can I go take it up, Ashar? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
So anyway, banking and financial services has always been the big target for cybercrime syndicates, essentially because you directly make money. So in now that there is a lot of uncertainty around the economy, and it's coming back up, like you said, there's a lot of money, etc. And the innovation in terms of the type of phishing attacks that are happening now to be able to do these kind of financial fraud on consumers. Of course, that's always been there, but it has increased even more now. And the other aspect from cybercrime syndicate side is with all the restrictions that are coming in now, the economic sanctions, etc. There is a lot of focus in terms of attacking the core infrastructure like SWIFT. SWIFT is the transfer system globally. We have had major attacks happening on SWIFT. Even about way back in 2013-14. There is a cybercrime syndicate that tried to pull out 100 million east, but it didn't really turn out to that much. But so the focus on hitting the core financial infrastructure like SWIFT to be able to manipulate financial transactions, I think, is definitely even more amplified today. But that is at a systemic level, not at a consumer level. At the consumer level, the number of phishing attacks, of course, keeps increasing, and and there's also the angle of using AI for attacks today, because the cybercrime syndicates are actively using AI, which means that there is a lot of intelligent attacks that can happen on a consumer with very less effort from the cybercrime syndicate side. So it's becoming more focused attacks on consumer side also, as against a spray and pray kind of approach.
Yes, you're right. Dev from India, a question?
I'll probably, I think I'm getting still, a few of them in my inboxes. I'll let Juhi ask and then I will follow.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Asher. I do have a question. Again, back on Vinod, what you said about the financial industry. If you look at companies that are in this industry, Seth, from your point of view as an investor, and then from the others having been in this field, what would you predict which companies are more likely to succeed? Those that focus on a specific aspect of securing, whether it's the network or, you do a lot of managed detection and response, or a more generalized, enterprise level security system. What companies, or what are the trends now that companies should be capitalizing on?
I mean, I think part of it is where in the life cycle that company is, right? If you're an early stage company, you're probably going to be focused on solving a small piece of that problem, although you may have sort of the vision for broader things. I think companies that just come out of the gate and say, we're going to solve everything, right? They're going to have a mediocre solution across the board, and nobody's really going to take that up. At some point, the question a lot of investors will always ask is this a feature or is this a product, right? And so if you're too narrow, you get sort of lumped into that. It's a feature. It's never going to be a product. But frankly, I think it also depends, again, looking at it from the investment perspective, what do you consider success, right? Because if getting acquired by a bigger company for a lot more money than you put in is a success, feature companies do get acquired, right? So this is probably a very rambling answer to your question there, but I think there's a lot of different ways to sort of answer that question depending on, what your success criteria is. But in general, I guess
like a true investor.
The one other thing I would add is what we have seen is a lot of companies really trying to build a very open platform, that they can be part of a bigger ecosystem, largely because it's the only way to compete against some of those bigger platform players like a Palo Alto, who now have one of everything, right? So if you're not Palo Alto, you need to be able to build up that partnership ecosystem by having a very open, integratable system.
And I think that's important also from a cross-border perspective, although I will say that cybersecurity out of all the skills is something that's pretty much uniform regardless of where you are. It's the same kinds of threats that you would face. But in our experience, since we work with international companies, sometimes going to market is hard because it's a new market, and you have to kind of tailor your product to meet the needs of the new market as it compares to your domestic market. I would imagine that in cybersecurity, there's less of that problem. Do you agree or disagree? Ellen?
I mean, yeah.
Sorry, no, just to give you a break, Seth.
Thank you.
I would like to chime in. I would personally think that it's not really based on where you're at, because I think that if we're all trying to be a part of a larger ecosystem, right? It's making sure that whatever you develop, that you're making sure that you understand all the potential risks and threats for that particular product or service, right? So like to Seth's point, not trying to be like I always say, trying to be a master of all things, but just trying to be a master of what's in front of you and what's a part of what you're working on, right? And really understanding what is important to that potential client, right? Because every client is different and their risk appetite is different. I've had some clients that will spend millions of dollars on physical infrastructure, but will only spend a couple $1,000s on, any another form of cybersecurity. So understanding what you're developing for what particular customer is also very key, and understanding what is important to them, right? Because some things may not be as important to them that it may be important to you. And then also, I'm just a big component of education, right? With all the different attacks, and there's always going to be something new, right? But making sure that you're educating your clients about what this looks like. So kind of walking them through, worst case scenarios also will help them kind of understand the importance of making sure that they are putting cybersecurity in the mainstream, and also in the beginning of any type of life cycle, the agnostic of whatever the technology is. And I think that will be very key, just making sure that you are staying abreast of yourself about what the current trends are, what's important to that particular customer or client, or even partners, seeing what they're taking as number one for what they're developing, I think will also be key, especially as part of your go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, well said, and thank you. And I have one more question, but I want to open up the floor to Arjun and Raja, especially if they have something. And I know, Dave, you have a question. You've been waiting patiently. Please go ahead. I think you're muted.
Yeah, yes, I would like to go. So we are working on the cyber insurance opportunity across India, Middle East, and the North American markets. And we have partnered with the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, and we are building a cyber insurance underwriting engine. So we were very keen, we've been following up, looking at Fairfax we have a joint venture partner who's based in Chicago, but for the reasons, the strengths mentioned in the conversation earlier, talent and many other, and we want to work with the financial industry more closely. So we're very keen to partner with Fairfax County and maybe the other bigger organizations also, on how we can collaborate through cyber insurance to make cybersecurity stronger across North America and India. So looking forward to post this conference to connect and work on this.
So that's a good segue. If any of our viewers on live or in the Zoom room wanted to connect with any of you, what's the best way they can do that? Are you currently looking for partners? Kiana, you mentioned that having a partner who's established in the market where you want to go is kind of the way to approach going to market. So anything you're comfortable sharing, should they connect with you on LinkedIn maybe, panel?
Yes, please do. I'm on LinkedIn. I can put my website and contact information in the chat as well. But yeah, we're definitely looking for companies that are ready to go to market, that have a very strong sense of what the current landscape is, and also understand just basic cybersecurity. Because I think sometimes it's, even though as new technologies emerge, just having those basic things, and we're kind of going back to the basic stuff, right? Making sure patching is done, making sure that you are paying attention to the security alerts, making sure that you're doing backups, just simple things that doesn't, cost a lot of money, but making sure that you have a clear understanding of what that looks like for the customers and clients in this marketplace. So I'll put my contact information, and yes, hit me up on LinkedIn. It's my first and last name, Kiana Gaming.
Thank you. Dave?
Yes, I have received, a few questions specifically for, I'll start with Miss Ellen. Well, Ellen, firstly, thank you so much, for your precious insights. Well, with Forescout, I think I received this from one of the Indian executive from cybersecurity industry. With Forescout expanding rapidly in the current years and hitting the unicorn status lately, how does a fast-growing organization like yours plan for challenges posed by new locations, and especially what are the benefits of such an expansion strategy, if mentioned, at times like COVID?
Yeah. Great question. And it's actually been a really hot topic. Specifically me in my role, I'm building out all of these teams. Our CEO uses a term, globalization. So it's we are going global, but we really have to appreciate and recognize the needs of the local teams, right? Those local regions. So we've made a big shift at Forescout to really bring our regional resources within those local teams. So instead of having a global team out of Americas that's trying to manage all the teams globally, I have now leadership and technical teams within each, because the needs of our customers definitely change when we're in APJ versus when we're in EMEA, right? The Middle East. So we try to recognize and really appreciate those differences and those uniquenesses. So I found that building teams locally, but then having some global governance so we can learn from each other and build those synergies across the team has been really important. So for instance, in our building out in Pune, we have an office there and we've built out leadership there so they can best drive what they need to be successful.
Thank you so much, very much, Ellen. So, I have almost at least three questions each for every speaker, and then some generic questions. But I'll just, let's say, cover two of them. One with Mr. Vinod, since we are streaming live on India right now. Mr. Vinod, firstly, thank you so much. So being an India origin leader based out of Fairfax County, what is the resemblance you see in India and Fairfax from both business growth and personal life perspective?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, so I think if I understand the question right, it's like, what's the similarity between the way life is in India versus Fairfax, and then also the business side of it, right? Okay. Yeah, I think I shifted about maybe 5-6 years back, into Fairfax community. So yeah, I think difference-wise, to me, it's all similar. Of course, on a personal side, there is a good diaspora of communities that blend together well in Fairfax. So it's great being here because, of course, the interaction is international, but at the same time, you also have a strong Indian community base here. So that definitely adds to the comfort. On the business side, I think the access, like what was highlighted before, as a location, being here, but still being able to go back and forth into India and the other geographies where we are, serving customers, other than just, looking into the US side, it's very easy because of, I think just the connectivity side makes a lot of difference. So that's one. And on the access to the skill sets that we get here again has enabled us to build much better, products and services. So that's again a great, advantage that I have seen. And on a personal note, the education system was great. So, for family, it's for my son, it's great that he's able to do really good education system. So those things on the personal side and on the business side, these are some salient things that I just wanted to highlight.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vinod. In the honor of time, I believe I won't be bothering any of the esteemed panelists anymore, and especially the audience also. Julie, please, yeah.
If Asher, do you want to close out? Do you want me to close out?
No, I want you to close. I'll just say again, thank you for the panel, Ellen, Kiana, Seth, Vinod. Thank you very much. It was really very important to chat this morning about those issues. That's it on my side.
Dave?
Sure, Julie. So first and foremost, I would like to express my appreciation to the speakers, panelists, Ms. Ellen, Mr. Seth, Ms. Kiana, Mr. Vinod, Julie, Asher, Fairfax Israel, and my team at India office for their valuable contribution to the cybersecurity Wednesday knowledge session, I will call it, aligned to the international growth. My deepest gratitude goes to all everyone who attended today's knowledge session and helped to make it such a commendable gathering. As always, it's been an honor to be among such accomplished leaders, industry experts, dignitaries, and to be able to share about how key industries are game changers and are pushing the boundaries of innovation, being Fairfax County, having it all, which is the answer why Fairfax County is for your tech business when thinking of US market. On the same lines, I'll just reiterate, what my colleagues and great panelists have shared. Fairfax County, the tech hub, is today's answer to innovation, growth, and their success stories. With the largest suburban office market and just minutes from Washington, DC, Fairfax creates returns faster than competitors in the world market. One second, who all are our competitors? Probably, I recall one or two location names from interactions with the executives, but to be honest, no one is close because the economic benefit of Fairfax County is second to none. Our economic, I think, last but not the least, one line, our economic advantage lies in the access we provide, access to the talent, access, including access to the US federal government, international companies, advantages, tax rates, and more. Whether you are a business in private sector, non-profit organization, a Fortune 500, or thinking, to set up your headquarters, Fairfax County has the business solutions that all you need. Well, that's it for today. I'll leave my and Alex's coordinates for the companies from India and Israel in case you would wish to, connect with us for one-on-one discussion. And apart from this, I'll be reaching out to each one of you for the one-on-one meeting as well. That's it from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here with us.